U.S. election results are in. Donald Trump has been elected what will be the 47th President of the United States. So what do you do now? What should you prepare for? And what should every nomad capitalist know? I'm going to touch on a couple things in this video, from potentially an end to taxes on expats and my thoughts on that, lowering of taxes for folks who live in the United States, the trade wars and the tariffs, personal freedoms, and just my overarching thoughts that politicians don't change your life, you do. One thing that kept coming up in my research from both sides is Elon Musk had said if Kamala wins, will he be sent to jail? How tongue-in-cheek was that? I don't entirely know. There were people who worked in the Trump administration and others who said if Trump gets back in power, will he investigate us? Will he persecute us? I don't want to get too much into that. We had Nigel Farage at Nomad Capitalist Live. He called, as a friend of Trump, he called a couple of the hangers-on scumbags. That's what he told the VIPs in the VIP whiskey tasting. So I don't know what to make of that, and that probably doesn't affect you. Is Trump going to come out and investigate people who are anti-Trump? Not sure about that. I don't know if that's an issue for most people. My biggest concern is the following. Washington is beyond saving. And I was talking to my father, the Nomad Dad, at Nomad Capitalist Live. He said, maybe you get a reprieve in some sense for 4 years if your guy or your girl gets elected. But the whole system is screwed. And what we've talked about for years is that the U.S. is not a country that turns on a dime. I've told you to get citizenship in countries that do turn on a dime, countries that are responsive to their citizens, countries that have to be nimble. That's one reason I have a Caribbean citizenship I obtained by investment. I want countries that are nimble in my life and that are heading in the right direction. The U.S. is going in the wrong direction. And as my father would say, the people are not willing to do the hard work to make the deep changes that are needed to save the place because they're too conditioned that everything just comes to them. And so that to me is the systemic issue. Trump gets in, is he going to change the culture of the average person? The average person maybe doesn't understand the fact that we have an event with 800 people in Malaysia and we have 100 people working here, none of whom live in the United States. That is a tiny, tiny, tiny microcosm of the fact that a lot of businesses are doing a lot of stuff overseas that used to do it in the U.S. And that's some of the people that Trump, at least in the first election, was talking to was, hey, I'm going to save you from these people taking your jobs and shipping them overseas. To me, that ship has sailed. And so is the ship of the U.S. really being turned around until it hits absolute rock bottom, like any alcoholic is said to have to hit. You got to hit rock bottom before you decide to make changes. And the U.S. has not hit rock bottom. So what is Trump going to change? Is he going to change that much? Well, one of the biggest proposals that we talked about in the last month of the election that somebody said, and I kind of like this description, this kind of sounds like a guy running for high school class president. I'm going to end double taxation on expats. And we talked about that. Does that mean an end to citizenship-based taxation, where you're roped into the tax no matter where you live, and banks don't want to deal with you, and there's FATCA, and there's F-bars, and there's all kinds of stuff that follows you around? Our own in-house team continues to believe, number one, that wouldn't be what would be put out there. It wouldn't be just an end to Americans pay tax everywhere. Now, what I always tell you is we help plenty of clients, some of whom are American, move overseas and reduce their taxes. Americans who have businesses can move overseas and dramatically reduce their taxes, but you're always in the claws of the IRS and of the U.S. Treasury. I think Trump's proposal was a bit vague there. Trump has a lot of proposals, and let's just say he puts that one in. Now, again, my reference point is Trump forced companies to bring money back to the United States in 2017. It wasn't an option. You were forced to do so. So that doesn't sound to me like someone who wants to say, hey, by all means, successful, affluent Americans move overseas and stop paying entirely. Don't even phone home. It sounds like perhaps there could be something where if you move to the right kind of place that we like, we'll give you some kind of relief from double tax. I am not convinced that even if any proposal makes it to the floor of the legislature, which, Donald Trump doesn't just get to dictate law, has to go through the Congress. I don't think any kind of citizenship-based taxation repeal takes place. I'm not sure there's a desire for it from his side. I think that he has become a savvy politician and said, hey, What are all the voting blocks no one talks to? One of them is 9 million expats living overseas. Hey, we'll end double taxation. It sounds good. Look at all the stuff in the Trump tax reform of 2017 that got cut out. Stuff he wanted that he gave up in order to get the bill across and get a win. Stuff that people in Congress didn't want. I don't, as somebody said, there's no senator representing the great state of expats. Expats are a very small percentage of the population. Who's going to stand up for them unless it's on principle? And what principle? There's no principle. And so I think that's something that if you do some big tax overhaul, I doubt it's going to be a law. We're repealing citizenship-based taxation. That's the whole law. It's probably going to be part of something, which, by the way, these tax bills, they put sunset provisions in there. It'd be interesting to think about. Could there be a temporary sunsetting of citizenship-based taxation that comes back later? I'm not sure to what extent that'd be possible. But, is that something that survives a law? Is that something if there's another big tax reform, or if they re-up the sunsetting tax reform, which I guess sunsets in 2025, can they slide that in there? Sounds like the kind of thing some guy, gets some political points by taking out at the end. So if you're an expat and you're banking on that, I wouldn't count on it. I continue to think, for a long, long time, the U.S. has taxed its citizens no matter where they live. What? They're going to give you some reprieve for a while and suddenly now all is good? That's like somebody lying to you 100 times in a row. And then they tell the truth once and they want you to totally trust them. I don't get it. And so someone asked, "Oh, would you be upset that you gave up U.S. citizenship if they ended that?" No, because I've been very clear. I don't think anyone gives up U.S. citizenship just as a protest against tax, especially someone in my boat who legally paid most years $0 with some restrictions. But you don't know what it's like to not have the restrictions until you don't have them. Yes, people do renounce citizenship over tax, but they're not renouncing it for just tax. And for me, it was certainly not just tax. I do think people oftentimes, it's the reporting requirements, which I am not convinced are going away, that cause people to leave. For me, Donald Trump doesn't change the culture of the country. I don't entirely agree with Donald Trump. Now, I don't hate Donald Trump. I don't disagree with everything he says. I do think that if you're someone who wants to live overseas, populism probably isn't your best friend. Populism is, hey, we got to bring jobs back to our country. And if you're someone who's going to live overseas, you get a tax advantage as someone running a business outside of the U.S. by hiring people who aren't physically present in the U.S. That makes you a bit of a target. And so any populist is always going to be a bit against you doing that, especially a guy like Trump who wants to bring the jobs back. I think populists think, hey, we live in the best country in the world, and you're lucky to be here. And they're either confused on a good day or downright scornful on a bad day of people who live the lifestyle we talk about here. Even if Trump was totally in favor of Nomad Capitalist, and I'm sure if Trump came and spoke at Nomad Capitalist Live once he's out of office, I'm sure he'd say glowing things. But, I wouldn't count on a culture. But the bottom line is, he's got 4 years, and whomever comes next could easily undo what he does in those 4 years. Now, somebody made a suggestion, if he ends citizenship-based taxation, someone else could just throw it back right in there. I guess, we saw in the UK, they ended the more than 2 centuries old non-dom program. Now, nobody ended it, brought it back, and then ended it again. I kind of think once it's ended, perhaps it is ended, at least for a while. I don't know how you bring that back. Although, Elizabeth Warren was crowing what a blessing it was to have citizenship-based taxation, so maybe some Democrats do bring it back. But whatever good stuff he does can be undone. The country, in my opinion, is beyond saving. I understand people may like to live there. The Nomad Dad still lives there half-time. But what the Nomad Dad has done is what we tell you to do. Have a lever. You could easily shift from living there half-time to a quarter-time or 0 time, depending on financial and other conditions. The other thing, if you want to stay in the U.S., you might say, hey, I don't want to leave the U.S. Why would I want to leave the U.S. if Trump's going to lower our taxes? How much is he going to lower your taxes? Now, maybe they're going to push something bold, but you don't have sweeping majorities in either house of Congress. So he's going to be somewhat limited. He wanted to flatten the tax rates, tax bans last time. Didn't they end up with more tax bans than they had before? The goal was to simplify the number of tax brackets, and I think they expanded them. So it wasn't really simplified. I remember thinking back then, that doesn't seem any more simple. George W. Bush, almost 25 years ago, lowered your taxes from 39.6 to 35%. Trump took him from where Obama put him back to 39.6 down to, I guess, 37%. Big sweeping changes. Most people who are watching this aren't running their business through a C corporation. That's where the big tax savings did come in, from 35 down to 21. If you're just running a business as a single owner, you're probably not set up as a C corporation. You probably have some other structure. Yes, there were some other advantages for pass-throughs, but here's the bottom line. No matter how much he lowers your taxes, he's not going to lower them 80 or 90%, which is what you could get by moving overseas. And whatever you're looking for in the U.S., whatever it says, oh, we'll move to Florida, they have no state tax and better weather. Well, you're going to save 1/5 or less the amount of taxes by moving to Florida and saving the state tax that you would by moving overseas. And there's places with weather like Florida. There's places like with weather like whatever you want. There's places that speak English. There's places wherever you want to go. You don't need to move to another state to lower your taxes. And if your thought is I'm going to live in the U.S. now because Trump's going to save everything, he's not going to lower your taxes by 80 or 90%. Now, if your thing is I'm never leaving the United States no matter what, so every extra penny helps, then by all means that's great. But we're not in alignment on that. My goal is, at the very least, you want to have a plan B. You want to have a second passport or more. You want to have at least one foreign bank account that has the option to hold other currencies and that has some basic level of asset protection. And you want to have some potential structure for investments and for estate purposes, like an offshore trust. Those are some of the things that you want to do. By the way, as long as you're an American, you're reporting those offshore structures and accounts to the Treasury. Do be mindful of that. We want to keep it legal. We are the goody two-shoes of the offshore business, after all. And so plan A would be, I'm tired of paying the high taxes here. I don't think the taxes are going down by 80%. I'm going to move to another country. If we're not on the same page on that, then maybe Trump is going to be good for you. But I don't think you're going to get any significant tax savings. The country's broke, in case you didn't realize, by the way. $1 trillion pays the interest right now. Just pays the interest. It's going to be interesting to see what a Republican in office will do. There's so much talk for as long as they've been alive. Republicans are the deficit hawks. They're gonna shrink the deficit. And Trump even said we're going to pay off the national debt. Added $8 trillion to it. I understand. I'm not using it the same way Biden or Kamala would. I understand COVID happened, but guy could have stood up for conservative principles and been more fiscally conservative even during COVID, chose not to do so. So maybe we'll see so much resource exploration, your head will spin and tax receipts will come flowing in. But the U.S. is broke. I don't know you're lowering anybody's taxes to 15%, especially on people who are wealthy. And I can tell you, the Democrats, they're not in some tiny minority right now in Congress. They will push back on that. Here's other things to consider. So that's your taxes. If you move overseas, we'll see what happens. I doubt the citizenship-based tax thing or the double taxation sees much of the light of day. Listen, maybe I'm wrong. And to the people saying, well, that's going to hurt Nomad Capitalist business if they get rid of citizenship-based taxation, I would say it helps the business. You'll have more people want to live overseas. You'll have more people coming and saying, all right, if it's easier now, I will move overseas. Not that Americans are all that we work with. But here's my bigger concern, again, with anybody populist, and I'm talking about this a bit more recently on the right wing. I largely voted for right-wing candidates in the U.S., except when I was protesting them because some of them just deserved to be thrown out of office. But more for the fiscal reasons, I was more right-wing until I realized they're not going to save me. They're not going to save my business. As Bill Burr says, they never put a sandwich on my table. But what I see the right wing going towards now is this sort of, don't be a dual citizen. We don't want dual citizens. Practice allegiance to your country. If you'd like to hear more about my thoughts on why the right wing won't save you, just leave a comment below. We may make that video. Now, are they going to outlaw dual citizenship? No, I don't think so. But I think in some way, and I don't know how exactly, as long as right-wing populism is in favor, the desire to have other options will be somewhat out of vogue, frowned upon. Maybe they'll do something. I don't exactly know. Do I think Trump's going to go out and chase Caribbean citizenship countries and try and weigh them down with more restrictions? No, I actually don't. I think that in some ways, on a practical, strategic level, he probably doesn't care. But when it comes to the core messaging of why aren't you just loyal to our country, I'd be curious to see what happens. And so I don't have a lot of there. This is not some patently anti-Trump statement, because I'm not patently anti-Trump. And I'm not patently pro-Trump. I don't care, quite frankly, but I do think that the idea that, oh, well, Trump's here and he's going to save it, so you don't need a second passport anymore. I don't believe. Again, the country is doomed. Even just add if you think he's the savior, add 4 years to the expiration date. By the way, I do think he wants you to stay in the country. I do think there will be some frowning upon people who go live elsewhere. Now, there's some people who are saying, oh, fewer personal freedoms. We have gotten calls from folks, oh, I don't want to live in a country without Roe v. Wade. That's up to you to determine what your personal freedoms that you want are. The other thing that applies to business, and I think probably a lot of U.S. persons don't understand exactly how it applies to you, is that the U.S. is fighting a battle to remain relevant in a world of increasing multipolarity. And where Trump talks about the tariffs and the potential of a trade war, whatever your policy is on that, fine. My concern is when you go around pissing other countries off, look at what happened with the chips. And we talked to Cyrus Jansen about this. We interviewed him at Nomad Capitalist Live. Yeah, the U.S. thumbed their nose in China's face. All right, we'll develop our own thing. Other countries are developing their own thing. You're seeing the U.S. lose its dominance because they want to be the boss. And even their own allies in some cases. Cyrus mentioned the Netherlands and how people were pissed off at the U.S. You're going to lose the dominance because there's so much competition in the world. It's not just like the U.S. can just do whatever it wants and have an iron grip on the world anymore. And I think that some of the tariff stuff, I think some of the talk could lead to, now Trump said he's against some of the sanctions, and I agree with him on that. The sanctions have not worked. I mean, the government was talking, Biden was talking about secondary sanctions, like let's sanction India because they buy stuff from Russia. You're going to sanction the whole bloody world. And then my fear is, well, what happens to your business? Sure, you don't want to sell to Russia, but do you want to sell to anybody else? Even if you don't sell directly to those countries, who's in your supply chain that's doing stuff internationally that's going to be hurt, that's going to come down to you? And so I think that, the sanctions policy has been too aggressive, and it's been perhaps out of some desperation. I think I would probably agree with Trump on that part, but I think on the trade war part, what trade war or what tariffs are applied back that even if they don't directly impact your business, impact your business. I suppose I'm an isolationist in terms of all the wars, which Trump claims he is. Is he going to close all the bases? Is he going to shut everything down? Hey, let's not send money to those other countries, he says. Okay, well, let's just shut the whole operation down. Just bring everybody home. And I think the world would be, as a whole, happier about that. Stop telling China they can't put a base thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away in Africa. Nothing to do with you. I don't know that financially I'm so much of an isolationist. And if you disagree, I respect that. But I think that it's going to have an impact on American business to be from a country that has these strong stands and that pisses people off. And I'd rather be the business that's incorporated somewhere that's neutral, owned by a guy with a citizenship that's neutral. And that's why I continue to believe, now I'm no longer a US citizen, but if you are, I continue to believe you want to have a second passport. Even with things like crypto, we've had investor clients over the years say, I can't get into certain crypto deals without a second passport or a second residence in some cases. And I think you might see a time when to do certain deals, being American's a disadvantage. And I don't know that Trump pushes that in the right direction. So I'm not here to tell you the sky is falling because Trump got elected. That's not my shtick. What I am here to tell you is, the sky was kind of slowly falling already. Maybe he, depending on your opinion on what your policies are, maybe he makes it a little slower, maybe he makes it a little faster. That's up to you to judge. I don't have a dog in this fight. And you know what? That's brought me a hell of a lot of peace in my life, not having a dog in this fight. People who hate Trump are going to watch this and say, oh, this guy's a Trump sympathizer. And people who love Trump are going to say that I'm dumping on Trump and I should vote for, Comrade Kamala. I'm in the middle on this. I don't care, but I do think from a tax perspective, it's something that we help successful people lower their taxes by being overseas. Nomadcapitalist.com/apply. You're much better going to that website and working with us than hoping he's going to lower your taxes a few percentage points. Personal freedom, you can take your own opinion on that. Business, I think nobody's talking about multipolarity because I think the U.S. persons are kind of in this bubble that we don't need anybody else, while somehow sticking their nose in a lot of other places. And even when they say they don't want to stick their nose there anymore, sticking their nose in a lot of places. I think people don't realize how connected the world is and how your business is going to take a hit. So I still think having a plan B is important. I think there's going to be chaos. A lot of people are not going to be happy about this. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be pushback. I would want to have a safe place to go physically. and I'd want to have a safe place to go for my business. I'm not saying you have to move your business offshore, but I would want a second passport. I like having another identity that's not American. Whether you like Trump or not, obviously there's going to be some people in the world that may downstream impact you that don't like whatever the U.S. is doing, and those countries probably don't care what St. Lucia's doing. So go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply if you want our help getting that second passport, or if you want to talk about lowering your taxes. Overall, not much has changed. You're going to pay high taxes. You're going to live your life, and I don't believe that any one politician tanks or saves the place.